Dr. Eva Witesman is a professor of public management in the Marriott School of Business at BYU and director of the Ballard Center for Social Impact. Dr. Eva Witesman.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you. I am going to invite you into a conversation that I am having right now with people like me at other universities. So people who lead social impact centers, people who are working with young people and thinking about how to train the next generation of civically engaged leaders. And one of the things that keeps happening in these conversations is that people will identify the uniqueness of BYU and the kind of work that we're able to do with our students. And they point out, now this is people from both faith-based institutions and secular institutions. They'll point out that there is an advantage to our students because of their faith. I want to talk a little bit about what that conversation looks like. So first, I want to just point out, I work at the Ballard Center for Social Impact. And so when I say social impact centers like ours, I want to sort of orient us to the space a little bit. What does social impact even mean? We define it as increasing human flourishing and decreasing human suffering. And so anything in which you're engaged, whether that's something at work that you're doing to help provide access to jobs for people, or any kind of product that you're creating that actually increases human flourishing or decreases human suffering would qualify, in addition to the lot of things that we've already talked about today: volunteering, engaging in government policies, actions, all of those things. So when we talk about social impact, that is what we mean. I mentioned that this was a conversation. We held a gathering here in Utah at Aspen Grove of social impact leaders from around the country, and that include people from places like Stanford, Yale, and Duke, but it also included folks who were at faith-based institutions. I want to share with you some of what people in this conversation are saying about the role of faith, not just our faith, not just my faith, but any faith in the work of social impact.
Faith is such a wonderful accelerant for social impact work.
Faith motivates us to love other people and to want to serve them and help them to flourish.
It's kind of the driving force to motivate individuals to want to do good.
Our faith identities inform our desire to make a good difference.
Having a faith-based identity provides this solid foundation from which they can do the work that they feel called to.
The faith perspectives that people bring, it animates their purpose.
These causes that we believe in, they're all inspired by the faith that we practice.
Faith creates communities, and communities are at the very heart of social impact work.
I was raised thinking about religion and spirituality as a great way to build community.
People of faith, all faiths, come together to solve a problem that had seemed to be insolvable.
It gives us a sense of community, with a sense that you're walking alongside someone or someone is walking alongside you.
If you want to show your neighbor your love, reassure them and say, hey, I'm here for you if you need anything.
Where we find some commonality is that each of our faith traditions compel us to ask big questions about community and what we owe to kind of creating a place where all in our community can flourish.
We have a lot more in common across our religious identities than we don't.
Faith helps to bolster us when we're facing the hardest, most challenging problems in the world.
A lot of people are searching for hope, or they're searching for something to ground them because there's so much going on.
I think of hope as a commitment more than a feeling. Trying to embrace that uncertainty, I think, is where there's a grain of hopefulness.
Faith is what sustains us when we want to give up. And people who are animated by their faith understand that this is something that they're called to do for their whole life.
Faith and spirituality can give you not only that grounding during the tough times, but it can give you that roadmap on how to really connect with someone.
That kind of internal driver can push us into doing really high quality work in what is really challenging and complex.
We should have more conversations where when religious leaders show up to the table to propose solutions about social impact, listen to the depth from which they come from,
one of the things that faith brings to that conversation is a sense of hope and a sense of belief that we actually can make a difference.
Our mission at the Ballard Center for Social Impact is to develop the faith and skills to solve social problems. And when we first started thinking about this, we were thinking about this as sort of two separate things. We were thinking about our faith, because that led us and motivated us to want to solve social problems. And then we thought about the skills that were necessary to actually do that in practice. And one of the things that we discovered, in part because of these conversations with our friends at other institutions, is that there's actually an overlap between these two areas. There are things that we are calling faith skills. And the idea actually came out of conversations with friends who were at secular universities who were saying, your students have this advantage because of their faith. And I'm like, well, help me understand that. We think that, but why do you think that? That's surprising to us, right? And essentially what they said is because of your shared faith, you have certain characteristics, beliefs, practices that people have been engaging in that are actually social impact skills that we have to actively teach our students. And I was like, well, tell me more about that. What are these skills that our students have that you are trying to teach? And that was sort of the beginning of a longer conversation that has led to the following ideas. There are 4 categories of faith skills. This isn't sort of the be all and end all. This is sort of, you're being invited into the middle of a conversation. So this is how we're thinking about things right now. But the first set of skills are personal skills. So these are skills where we nurture an inner life and a connection with the divine, an understanding of who we are and how we orient ourselves in the space. The second are a group of relational skills. So this is where we have the skill and capacity to build meaningful relationships with others. That is actually a skill and can be taught and learned and practiced. And one of the places that is taught and learned and practiced is within faith settings. The third is communal. So this is creating effective community and institutions. So people who gather with other people of faith already have an understanding of what a community can be. And if these are organized communities around shared values, they also start to understand what that community governance can look like. And it looks different in different faiths, but the idea of gathering and understanding what a community is actually an idea as that we secularize and as we individualize, we actually lose those skills and they have to be retaught. We don't have to teach them quite as much in faith communities. And the final one is this transformational idea. You heard people in the video talking about hope. Transformational skills are where we reach for transcendent human flourishing, where we have some idea of something that is greater than ourselves that together we are working to achieve. This is not something that we only do in faith communities, but it is something that we do and we practice in faith communities. So I'm going to get just a tiny bit more specific with each of these. And given that we are an interfaith conference, I really wanted to just highlight the fact that these aren't unique LDS skills. These aren't just BYU skills, right? These are skills that we can see across many different, not only religions, but types of religions as well. So under personal, where we're nurturing that inner life and connection with the divine, things like dignity, where we understand that human beings are divine and carry with them a sense of value, even if they're different from us, and that we honor that divinity in them and that dignity in them is actually a skill that can be taught. Agency, the idea that people can make choices and that they should be empowered to make their own choices. And that is an important part of what it is to have and express that dignity. Discernment, the personal ability to choose and discern between things like right and wrong or truth and error. As we think about this AI era in our media consumption, understanding what is truth, what is not truth, goes far beyond faith, but it's something that people in faith communities have already gained some baseline in. Humility is another one, the willingness to learn, which is so essential in social impact work. Resilience, the ability to face hard things and push through them is one of the things that religion bolsters people to do and helps them to do. Resilience is one of the things that especially folks at my sister universities that are secular, that's one of the things that they're focused on very much right now, that and hope. These are two of the skills that they're finding that their students struggle with in ways that students who are engaged with faith communities may not be quite as challenged by. Moving on to relational, this is where now I'm connecting myself with at least one other person. So the idea of honoring that other person is an example. Empathy and compassion, where I not only see your struggles, but I engage in them with you and I feel them with you. Care is a big value that's really important in service work and social impact work, and is something that is taught in every religious framework on the planet. Love and reconciliation as well. They look different in different religions, but the idea that these are important ways that we relate to one another is something that faith communities do very, very well, and are things that are a little bit less present in a secular, individualized world. It's not that people can't do it. It's not that faith has a corner on that market. It's just that being engaged in faith communities tends to help develop those skills and give us a baseline for that. When we move on to communal skills, this includes things like communion itself, the idea that there is something beautiful in the gathering of many people, and that gathering of many people creates something that's better and more beautiful than sort of atomistic, individualistic components. The idea of covenant, and the quote here I have is from my own faith, from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I will tell you, I learned more about what a covenant community is from Rabbi Berman when he came to speak on our campus. And he talked about what a covenant community looked like for him in his Jewish faith. I understood my own views of a covenant community where we have a social contract, where we promise things to each other because we have promised them to a higher power. That idea also translates to social impact with this idea that I owe my society and I owe my community and the people that I share this planet with, I owe them some of my effort because together we are something greater than we are apart. That idea is important as well. The ability to have governance in faith communities, we have structures that are different from government structures. And so we recognize that there are alternative structures by which we can organize because we practice it. And so that gives us a flexibility of understanding around governance that empowers our social impact work. The idea of stewardship, that the things that we get to manage and the things with which we're blessed, that those aren't just ours, that the way I manage myself and my possessions and my engagement in society is actually something that I'm accountable to others for, is one of those principles. And then belonging, the idea that we can have kind of a community identity, and Ubuntu, which is the idea that because we are, I am. So these ideas are things that can be taught in any setting, but people from faith communities often have these faith skills that can be used and applied in social impact. This last group of transformational skills really are where we raise our sights to what is possible. And I mentioned before that hope and resilience are some of the areas where especially our secular universities are trying to bolster their students, and they're actually actively looking to faith communities to figure out how people who are engaged in big, difficult, challenging, wicked problems in the world maintain their sense of hope and resilience, even when it can feel like everything is burning to the ground. This set of skills is what raises our sights and gives us that hope in a brighter future. And so those are things like a value of peace, that we believe peace is possible and we can work toward it, that harmony is possible. So peace and harmony includes the idea that there are many that are becoming one. It's not just peace among people who are similar, but many are becoming one in harmony. The idea of progression, that we can in fact get better and that we are called to do better, depending on kind of what the faith framework is. Consecration, the idea that we can take our actions and commit them to a higher good. The idea of abundance, that even when it feels like we are sort of depleting resources, that there is a possibility of working together to behave in a way that will actually invite abundance, is a common belief among many different faith traditions. And that idea that that's possible and that that is sort of a divinely sanctioned idea or a way that we want to walk can give us that hope. And then finally, the idea of sanctification, the idea that there is holiness in what we do. And if you step back and you look at some of the institutions that we've talked about today, if you think about government institutions, the idea that there is a holiness to, for example, democracy, regardless of whether or not it is rooted in a specific faith tradition. And people like to connect it often with Christianity because that was one of the frameworks that the founding fathers were using in this country. But this idea of sanctification, that our public service is holy, that it means something more than just a day-to-day action, doesn't have to be associated with any one faith tradition or even a faith tradition at all, but it can help us to bring more dignity and respect to the offices that we fulfill when we serve one another. So together, these things form some ways of thinking about not just faith, not just I happen to have faith and that helps me want to do good things. And I also am going to equip myself with skills. And that's how I'm actually going to do the work of social impact. The idea that there's an intersection here, that there are faith skills that are actually transferable into this space, is a newer concept and one that we are in conversation with many people across the country and in other parts of the world about. And so the personal skills help us to prepare to face significant hardship, sorrow, and challenge that we will face as we engage in difficult global challenges. Relationally, it allows us to understand the impact of social problems and solutions on the people who are actually experiencing those challenges and those solutions. The communal perspective helps us to think in systemic ways and to implement not just individual solutions, but also systemic solutions, because we can think in community. And finally, transformationally, we have that reach for transcendence together that allows us to keep our hope and an expectation for a better future.